Yep. Today we're here actually to broadcast a live stream of red identification and spawning surveys to classrooms throughout Vermont. All right, I'm Jacob Fetterman. I work for Trout Unlimited as the project coordinator of the Batten Kill Home Rivers Initiative. And we launched the program actually just this past January. And so this fall is the first time that we're doing a watershed-wide spawning survey for the Batten Kill. And so we've been out on tributaries and reaches of the main stem looking for spawning activity. So to identify reds, which is the spawning bed that trout make, and they're really visible to the eye because of the contrast in substrate color. So you're just looking on the stream for a lot cleaner gravel because that's how they make the bed. A female will excavate a little pit, and then her and a male will actually lay eggs and fertilize them. Then she'll go up a little bit farther upstream, do the same thing to dust more clean gravel over top and really secure those eggs. So I mentioned that it launched in January, but the Home Rivers Initiative is really a multi-year project to restore the waters of the Batten Kill. So we're looking for key areas to restore, and that's part of what this spawning survey ties into, is that we're looking for the critical habitat for trout, and we'll work more in those areas to enhance and restore habitat, maybe in sections between those really critical areas for increased connectivity. And on tributaries, something we'll look at with spawning is potential barriers. So road stream crossings are a big one, and so if there's a culvert that is impassable to trout, we might look at an area, if we've seen spawning below that barrier, that will try to get money that would replace that culvert, make it passable to fish, and reconnect increased spawning habitat upstream. Yes, so I'm Jacob Fetterman. I work for Trout Unlimited as the project coordinator of the Batten Kill Home Rivers Initiative. And I'm out here freezing today to show everyone some trout spawning in the Batten Kill River. And I think you might have tried to show on the map where we are, but I didn't see it. We're actually just upstream of Union Street Bridge, outside of Manchester, right down the hill from the Equinox Hotel. So a red is actually the spawning bed of trout, and the ones that we're going to show you in a bit are most likely from brown trout. So this time of year in the fall, both brook trout and brown trout will be spawning, and in the spring, if there were rainbow trout in the watershed, that's when they would spawn. So a red, though, is actually excavated by trout. So a female will kind of make a depression in nice, good gravel that then her and a male will actually spawn over top of. So a female will release eggs, the male will put milt, which is the male reproductive juices. So they'll spawn, so the eggs will be fertilized, and then the female will actually go a little bit further upstream and she'll kind of excavate somewhat of another bed, but it's really just dusting more clean gravel down over top of where the eggs were laid in the stream. So that process makes what we call a red. Yes, so we're actually right next to them. So Suzanne's gonna flip the screen and we'll go. So there's two right next to each other here, and they've actually been here at least 10 days that we know of. So the first one is right here. Is everyone able to see it?
Are you picking up the color variation? Can you see?
And they can't spawn in really fine gravel like sand because then it actually kind of chokes the eggs out. So they need good oxygenation in order to incubate and then hatch with high success rates in the spring. That's a good question.
What's the difference between a brown trout red and a brook trout red?
So the difference typically is that brown trout will produce a larger red, and they're more often in these riffly areas. Brook trout will prefer areas where the water's not flowing as fast, so they'll be sometimes more associated with pools, and they'll often be a little bit more circular, which is also attributed to the amount of flow going over them. But brown trout really do prefer the faster water associated with riffles or the tail out of pools. So you could actually notice, maybe Suzanne can show you upstream, that the water is coming into this riffle slower and it's deeper up there. So then this is really the start of the riffle where they've spawned. And so the water gets a little bit faster, shallower, and that again helps with the incubation of the eggs and keeps them safe and secure in the clean gravel that they were laid in.
Yeah, we're gonna walk right over here.
Able to see it well? Yep, so this one, probably about the same length and a little bit wider towards the top end of it and not as wide towards the base. But definitely where they've spawned, and really neat because you can look at this and it's like very obvious that that's where they've spawned. And so when people are going out looking for reds, the thing that I have been telling you is when you see one, you'll know, because the contrast in the substrate is just so drastic that it's like, there it is. Repeat that last part. What about trout?
Trout makes them an important part of the ecosystem.
Okay.
What specifically about trout?
That's a very good question. So what makes trout important? So as far as the food pyramid goes, they're important to species that would be above them, such as predatory birds like eagles you'll see along the Batten Kill. So trout support animals like that, and they're also an indicator of the overall health, because you won't find trout in a stream if it's impaired by something such as either really warm water, acidity in the system. So there's a lot of factors that play into what supports a healthy trout population, and so that in itself tells you what the ecosystem is like in general. So the role that they play is kind of an indicator species of when the ecosystem might be headed in the wrong direction. Why did the trout start to decrease in numbers? And is when and why? Okay. I couldn't give you an exact day or year, but sometime around when humans started to develop land, that would have been really the start of when natural trout populations would have started to be impacted. And then in response to that, we started to try to mediate it by stalking trout. So the stalked trout is not really a foolproof fix, it's kind of temporary. So putting trout into a stream isn't going to solve the real problem. So in order to actually solve the problem, you need to address the issues, which could be things like the pollution, the sedimentation into streams. So those factors that have occurred due to human land development are really what have led to declines in trout populations. And then also a warming climate is another factor that continues to threaten populations. They're being more confined to headwater streams where temperatures are still suitable for them to persist year-round. Yes, so that's a good question about what kinds of activities and interventions we could do to improve trout habitat. The addition of large wood is frequently used because wood provides a lot of that necessary overhead cover for trout, so they're less susceptible to be preyed upon by things I said earlier, like predatory birds, so ducks, eagles, hawks, osprey, and so that in itself provides good cover, and it's also usually attributed with deeper water. So making sure that the channel is stable, it has access to a floodplain, also making sure floodplains are well vegetated is important. So trying to restore what is naturally seen in a watershed without human impacts is then good for the trout. That's a good question. So why are reds lighter in color? So I said that how they actually excavate the red is by the female will actually take her tail and disturb the rocks. So when a stream is stagnant, or it's not really stagnant, but it's consistently flowing, rocks actually build up an algae film on top of them. And so then when a female does that and disrupts the rocks as they were laying, it overturns some, cleans them off, so it gives them a cleaner appearance, which is usually lighter in color than the rocks covered in algae around them. And what are important factors in lakes and ponds that are good for trout spawning? And so brook trout specifically could tune into spring seeps in a lake or pond. And so kind of similar idea is that a spring seep coming up through may clean off that gravel bottom. And so brook trout will tune into those areas and spawn. Also usually colder water, that flow, important again to oxygenation. And if it's connected to tributaries from that pond or lake, trout, salmon that are landlocked, all these different fish will actually migrate up into these tributaries and spawn as well. What weather conditions make it beneficial to trout spawning? And so trout and other fish are really in tune to the environment around them. So things like the photo period and temperature of the water will kind of give them a natural cue as to the right timing to spawn. So when I say photo period, that is actually the length of the day. So as we approach winter right now through the fall, the length of day that is actually light outside keeps getting shorter and shorter. So as the length of the day gets shorter, temperatures go down, something internally in a fish tells them, okay, it's time for me to spawn. Another factor is the water flows. So through the summer, flows typically go down, down, down. And then in the fall, water starts to come back up. And especially in the Batten Kill, we've noticed that just this year with how low the flows got, some tributaries actually became disconnected from the Batten Kill. And now as water levels are coming back up, fish can make it back up into those tributaries and spawn in those areas that either they have historically or possibly that they were even started as an egg themselves in. What are the biggest threats to trout in 2020? I would say this is a tough question to answer, but the biggest threat to them, at least here in the Batten Kill, I see as the rising temperatures and sedimentation. So I didn't pick one there, but temperatures are definitely putting more and more stress on them. And as I mentioned, streams drying up through the summer is going to put a lot more strain on them. And then the sedimentation issues are kind of twofold because it diminishes the available habitat, and then also for spawning also degrades the quality of the spawning habitat. Okay, another good point. So what causes sedimentation? It could be places where banks are eroding, and banks are especially vulnerable to erosion when the riparian vegetation is lost. So as trees along the river are cut down, you actually lose the benefits of their root systems that actually hold all of that soil on the bank together. So that's one cause of sedimentation. Other causes could be something like an undersized road crossing could increase sedimentation around it. There's a few different things that cause sedimentation, but they all end up having the same detrimental effect. Things could prey on eggs, but usually you don't think of trout eggs as being a food source for many other organisms. But you could imagine that there's possibly macroinvertebrates that could get into red and enjoy some good calamari.
Common? Are they
Yes.
Yeah.
So actually someone that frequents the Batten Kill looking for reds last winter had a video of kind of that same thing, that actually the male that was with the female noticed the smaller male trying to come up and he chased them off and then came back in. So yeah, there's definitely that you'll have males kind of competing for a female or trying to kind of sneak in and mix in their genetics.